Welcome to Remarkable WAM.
So I think, we're talking about you may be a month old would probably be the sort of timescale that I would expect, if that makes sense.
Sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good.
So cool. Are you happy, Andy?
Yes. I'm just do you know the microphone was making that funny sound? Is it doing that at your end? Was it okay?
No, I thought that was just you.
Yeah, it was my
Ta-da! It does every now and then. It does a funny squeak. I thought it might be your phone, but
no, that's off now.
Okay, crack on. So look, let's push on. If everyone's happy,
let's do it.
I will just cycle through to my little notes here. Hello, my name is Chris Mills, and together with my friend Andy Reid, we are your hosts in this ongoing podcast. Thank you very much for joining us. This is Remarkable WAM, and that's Remarkable Wealth and Asset Management. Obviously nothing to do with that wonderful, successful 80s band that we reference every now and then. But today, as ever, we'll be hearing some more remarkable stories and initiatives from remarkable people working in WAM. How are you doing today, Andy?
Good. Happy New Year.
Of course.
Yeah. This is our first podcast of 2021. I'm doing very well. I'm energized. I'm busy. And I'm excited about our guests. We've already sort of had a chat before pressing the record button. So depending on which order you're listening to the podcasts, I'm looking forward to speaking with Charles and hearing his stories. So let's go.
So as we said earlier, Andy, I mean, we're as with all this podcast, we're on a mission to inspire a new investment landscape, and I guess something that's fit for purpose for everyone in the investment world, not just for those in the middle of it, but the participants, the end consumers, the Mrs. Miggins and a pension, all of the small to the large, and we try to cut through some of that jargon. So if we do use too many acronyms, and I might be leaning on Charles for this because he is the expert, and we'll just have to try and tag along there. We'll have to sort of cut through them. And obviously, as you know, we have an ongoing quiz for which I have to be very upset about, but Andy's holding his own. This is not a whitewash.
It's not. No, I would say it's played 3, won 1, lost 1, drew the other, but then I said we couldn't have a tie, so then I lost that one. But in all fairness, that was to a man with a PhD.
It's true, but look, you had your chance.
I had my chance. So,
but anyway, look. We've kept our guests waiting.
Yeah.
So let's. I will introduce.
He's out of the green room.
Yeah, exactly. No. So look.
Take that peeled grape out of your mouth, Charles.
Yes. I mean, today we're joined by Charles Radclyffe, who studied law at Cambridge, I believe, followed by becoming a small business owner in the southwest of England, no less, and then venturing into the delights of financial services, I think in 2007 with Standard Bank or thereabouts. He has, I think it's fair to say you've tackled both small and large businesses across what you might call fintech and finserv sectors. You've advised firms at Level 39. You are a co-author of, Stories from 2045, which we're rapidly approaching, about AI and the future of work. And I think when I bumped into you, first of all, you were the head of AI at Fidelity International. So an enviable CV. But today you are the founder and owner of Ethics Grade, which is an ESG benchmarking and ratings agency and specializing particularly in AI ethics. All fair? Are you well, Charles?
Yeah, that was weird to hear somebody introduce you, because then the great work of fiction that's known as your LinkedIn profile suddenly gets played back to you.
But as you know, well, unless you're one of those rare beasts, I very much doubt whether that was planned from the age of 15. And each of those wonderful stepping stones. In hindsight, these things sound wonderful, but each time, I guess it becomes the most obvious step next, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly that. Someone said to me once that you've always got to be doing whatever it is you're doing. You need to be able to kind of look back and see everything makes sense, kind of looking backwards. But looking forwards, everything is always very uncertain, particularly as an entrepreneur. And sort of 11 months into my new business, we still may yet pivot once or twice before we strike gold or give up. So we'll see.
Well, I thought it would be useful to roll back to those early days and then push forward, if that makes sense. And I'll ask the really unfair question to begin with, because it's completely off the topic that we're talking about here. But why law at Cambridge?
That's a long story. So I've got my old man to thank for that, and I will always be grateful to him for pushing me down that road. I was always a bit of a geek at school. Still am. In fact, if this camera was facing the other way, I could show off some of my my vintage electronics, which I collect. When I was a teenager, I used to spend my time fixing computers and breaking computers, and I had the dream growing up in the era I did that I would be the next Larry Ellison or Steve Jobs. Or
so it was the computer thing, not the yacht thing, that you liked about Ellison.
Yeah, definitely.
Just checking.
My dad was never really that interested in technology, and I think tried to talk me out of it as best as possible. And I remember the one thing he said to me was that it was not going to be a respectable way to spend my life or my career, and I should be a lawyer instead. And that, I think now looking back, I can see the irony in that in that comment. But also, I can see now as a dad myself, there's always a temptation to kind of try to push your kids down your own fantasy version of your own life. And I think if my dad would have his time again, he would want to have been a lawyer. Hence why he sent me down that path. And why Cambridge? I wanted to study politics, philosophy, and economics at Oxford. And that was the degree I really wanted to do. I'd never felt at home at Oxford, and I went to Cambridge. And just the moment I got off the train, I just fell in love with the city. And the thing that was most surprising to me, because I was totally convinced that I could see my future at Downing College studying law. When I got rejected, it was just like sheer disbelief, because I could picture myself in Cambridge. I was so certain. I just felt so at home there. I felt this. I had arrived at the place I was supposed to be at. I couldn't understand the rejection, so I did the very foolish thing of turned down all my other offers, reapplied the next year, only to Cambridge.
Really?
And just rolled the dice big time, and I got in. So thank God I did. And I don't know what my parents were doing, not talking me out of that really stupid idea. But
fortune favours the brave.
The rest is history, they say.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's very looking back. I can just for anyone listening who had a similar experience, it was just 4 years which I didn't appreciate enough at the time, how and I think that's true of everyone that looks back and just sort of sitting by the river. It's a beautiful city, and having the time and the space to read and study and master master the subject. I wish I'd had, I wish I could live in those years forever, I would say, because now I live in a situation where I would love to be able to read more, study more, do all of those things which I probably should have spent more of my time at Cambridge doing and less time down the pub or having parties with my friends.
It's. I mean, I asked the unfair question. Just interested, it's at those formative years, and I think I said to my wife just the other day about, youth is wasted on the young, isn't it? You just don't appreciate that ability to immerse yourself in a topic in such a, in almost a languid way, really. I mean,
you'd all go in a heartbeat, wouldn't we? If someone could say, Chris, Andy, Charles, we'll give you 12 months to indulge yourself.
Oh yeah.
Catch up with all the reading, go and explore 2 or 3 key questions that you found yourself rattling with. Your current life as it is will be on pause. It will be in a time capsule. Come back in 12 months' time having things out. I'd go in a heartbeat, yeah? And happily get distracted by the river, drinking brown beer and thinking clever thoughts. But
let's wend back onto this.
I think just one thing to say. The other thing about it is when I think having a set time to be able to do this is so valuable. Like the only other time I had when I was on gardening leave, when I sold my data analytics business, I had a kind of open-ended amount of time between that, being kind of, as an entrepreneur, you look forward to the day that you exit. It's kind of a bittersweet day in a way, because you're kind of giving up your baby, you're giving up your dream, you're giving up your relevance, but you're kind of opening up your freedom. And I probably, I knew that day was coming. I had it, probably in mind for 6 or 9 months before my final day, and I was looking forward to that time of freedom and having the time to do all those things. I had this great idea of all the things I would do, like you say, like spending the time to read and study and all those things I wanted to do. But the problem is when you're in that position, when you're in that kind of zone of, now I've got an open-ended amount of time. For the first 6 weeks or so, it's probably quite fun, or it was for me at least. But then after that, you suddenly think, oh shit, what am I going to do next? And then there's that anxiety of what's the next thing I'm going to do suddenly takes over. And I think now being back in that entrepreneurial mode, I wish I had allowed myself a dedicated amount of time. I wish I'd said to myself, it's going to be a year or 2 years. I'm going to master the next craft, or I'm going to, take up a hobby and become an expert at it or something. And I think I think one of the beautiful things about university days is it is 3-4 years, but I think when you're at that age, you just don't appreciate the fact that time box time of being completely immersed in that subject, in that field, is something which maybe later in life you'll crave again. Sorry, Chris.
It makes perfect sense. And all these things add to experience, don't they? I mean, that's why we are what we are. And I'm just interested, from that, and I know, we've talked about this before. You started up some small businesses, and I think you helped to service, on the computer side, and built up a business there. And then I guess, as I said, you launched yourself into financial services. What was the decision point there? How did you enter financial services, and then describe your journey, let's say, to Fidelity, if that's an easy thing to ask?
Well, the funny thing is that I say LinkedIn is always your greatest work of fiction. So I think when I was writing my LinkedIn profile originally, my greatest anxiety was my age, because I was quite young. I felt, compared to many of the people I was up against for roles, and positioning myself against in the market. And so I tried to obfuscate my age a little bit by being, I think, creative with the dates on some things. And the bit I was creative was I just took my university dates off my profile. And back in those days, you could do that. You can't do it anymore, I think, I've been told. And so the truth is about my story is that actually despite my old man sending me to Cambridge, I did actually manage to, because I had to reapply and I had to find something to do in that year of reapplication. I did actually end up setting up a computer business in that year. So if you look at the chronology of my LinkedIn profile, it shows, Cambridge and then a computing company. But actually the truth is,
yes,
the computing company started first. I ran it while I was at Cambridge. It was a big secret. I got found out in my last year and nearly got kicked out as a result. And then I managed to graduate and then came to my senses and was very lucky and sold the business. And the reason I got into financial services was through sheer luck. I did a sort of Dragon's Den live event in London just after I graduated, and I was looking to raise investment for my computer business. And you can imagine sort of watching Dragon's Den, Duncan Bannatyne sucking air through his teeth, and telling you that it's not scalable and all that sort of thing. That was a kind of real lived experience for me. But one of the sort of dragons on that panel really liked my story, hated the business, but liked the story. And he said, the best thing you can do is sell your business. It's not scalable. You'll never go anywhere with it. And when you do sell it, give me a call, and there'll be other things that we can do together. And what was just amazing, and the way that kind of luck plays its turn, is I got a huge amount of media coverage from that event, and that led to another IT company in the Southwest, seeing the story, reaching out. That led to them acquiring the business, and it was a matter of 2.5-3 months later, I found myself in London, having had an exit. I was like 23 perhaps at the time. I can't remember. I was 23, 24, quite young. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And I gave that investor a call, and I said, "Hey, you told me I should sell my business. Well, I have." He said, "Wow, that's amazing. No one ever follows my advice." I said, "You said you'd have something from, that we should work on together, and you seem to have like ideas." And he said, "Well, actually, I have a company that's the CEO has just quit, and it'd be perfect. You've obviously experienced a few roller coasters and ups and downs, and you can deal with the stresses of that. You should have a look at this business, and you could take it on and run it." And I guess all the alarm bells should have gone off, all the red lights should have been, but when you're 23, you have no appreciation for risk. And what was really interesting, the CEO quitting a business and not having someone lined up should have been the biggest telltale sign of impending disaster. But basically, this company had run out of money. It was down to, literally weeks of not being able to make payroll. And the CEO, having been browbeaten by the investors, had just kind of given up and said, "Look, it's your problem. I'm out of here," and she had stepped away. But fundamentally, it was a good little business and pretty sound. And what it did was it provided a comparison service of financial services products via a website. And the thing that we did differently to other companies is we didn't have a consumer-facing website. So we essentially white labeled the comparison to other firms, and those other firms being what in 2005 and 2006 weren't particularly well-known household brands, but today we'll recognize them as Confused.com, Compare the Market, Money Supermarket, Money Saving Experts, Auto Trader. The list goes on. So they were our clients. And what we had the relationships with the banks and the credit card companies and insurance companies. So we earned the commission from basically giving them new business deals, and we negotiated those deals and we brokered them, and we partnered up with people who were better at marketing than us. And I realized, and I went back to the investors. We basically cut costs. We managed to kind of get out of our cash cliff. And we stayed in business, and I kind of figured out what was going on. And I went back to the investors, and there were sort of 5 or 6 of them, and they'd all kind of fallen out with each other and hated each other. And I went back to them and said, "Look, here's the opportunity. What we need to do is we need to go and build ourselves a consumer brand. We need to raise investment, do a ton of marketing, because if we don't do that, we're going to get squeezed out, because these other firms are going to suddenly realize that what we do, the clever maths in terms of the comparisons, isn't actually that clever. They can do that themselves. If they've got the data, they can do that themselves. And if they've got enough traffic, they've actually got much more leverage on us to squeeze down our margin, and they can go direct to Barclaycard or Direct Line or whoever they're getting commission from." And the investors, I think, having just lost trust in each other, just saw any new idea as being an opportunity to be screwed by one of the other investors. And so I just realized I couldn't get agreement at all. And the chair of the business was a guy called John Roberts, who I think, one of the people who's had the biggest impact on my career. He used to be the CEO of Next, and there's a very famous story about how he did some boardroom shenanigans in order to try and do the right thing for shareholders, but deal with a immensely political situation. And I think there's a book about that story. But John was just a great person to have around, a very wise individual. And he said, "Look, Charles," he said, "you're never gonna these 5 people. You're never gonna get them to agree on anything, regardless of how good the idea is. And the best thing you can do is to get them what they all want, which is to get them value for their shares, right, and to get out, because you're not going to be able to raise money and get these 5 people. Someone will veto it, and it won't happen." And I was very lucky. Again, met the right place, right time, met the right person, and we did end up selling that business just a few months later to a large direct marketing company. What happened there was that I was 24 and a half, 25 at that point, perhaps. 2 exits behind me, a little bit of capital, not a ton of capital, but wholly unemployable, I think it's fair to say. And I realised that the problem you've got with youth and success is that you have to keep riding that trajectory, otherwise you're very, very exposed. But what happened was, because I'd sold to this direct marketing company, who were AIM listed, my little division reported into this other guy who was twice my age and deeply resented me, and just made my life very difficult, and set me impossible targets, and it was just very, very hard. And then I realised, until the end of that year, that there was a little bit more going on. And actually, I suddenly realized there was a bit of a game going on. And I wasn't going to have my dream of kind of selling the business in order to have a safe place with extra investment to really grow the business and seize the opportunity. That was my dream, but it wasn't their dream. And also, it was very clear that, I wasn't wanted. Anyway, what happened was I basically got kind of booted out on performance grounds, and there was a lot of conversation about basically, I was too young, didn't have enough experience, couldn't handle a team because all these teams were older than me and they were much more experienced than me. It wasn't reasonable having a 25-year-old running this business. It wasn't good for the rest of the company for this young buck to be there, and all of these things about my age. And anyway, the clock struck. I think it was the 1st of January 2007. I think I was terminated a week later. 1st of January 2007 was when age discrimination laws came into force in the UK. So I sued them. No. The letter I got back from them was, you can't sue us on age discrimination grounds. That's there to protect old people from being booted out because they turn too old, not to protect 25-year-olds. And that's where my law degree came useful. And I said, well, where in the legislation does it say anything about discriminating people on youth? Or where does it say you can't do that? Where does it say that? Anyway, it
would be self-referential, wouldn't it? You would have to sue.
Yeah. So I ended up, with a bit more capital behind me after that small argument. But as I say, wholly unemployable. And without any good ideas of my own of new businesses to start, I drifted for a few months. Did a bit of work in turnaround, which was really interesting. Worked with a guy who has sadly now passed away, but was a very dear friend of mine who taught me a lot about business. And we were looking at buying engineering companies in the West Midlands. That's a very different world I could have gone into. But basically buying an underperforming business and turning it around, I very much saw that as my future. And then we were very close to buying a precision engineering firm in the automotive industry in 2007, and then suddenly found that all sources of finance that were very easy when we started that conversation suddenly became very difficult. And then I suddenly thought, well, if we're heading for a recession, if there seems to be a downturn in the market, if there's a financial crisis, then it's going to affect all parts of the economy. The best place to be is in the finance industry. Surely I should get into banking. And so pulling a few strings and asking a few favors, I managed to get myself a job at Standard Bank and moved to Jersey, thinking that would be the safest place to ride out the financial crisis. And of course,
Jersey.
It wasn't.
But I'm interested. You've got an irreverent streak of entrepreneurial activity. You're taking opportunities. You're phoning up, wise men that you shouldn't be. And you're leveraging some of those skills that you have in law, etc., taking advantage. Why did you start Ethics Group? Where did that little burning ember start? Leveraging both data and technology into that ethics landscape and ESG. Where did that start from, do you think?
Well, I would just want to maybe share another little anecdote that would kind of give it a colour and maybe a bit of entertainment as well. So having had a couple of years in banking during the financial crisis and bounced between a few organisations and not really worked out, I had a very, very dark and dismal year in 2009, like a lot of other people, scratching around trying to, having spent all my money, being slightly older, still somewhat unemployable. But flat broke. So 2009 was a really, really, really hard year. But towards the end of that year, an old school friend of mine who was in the venture capital business put me in touch with a couple of German guys who had a track record of basically waiting for an American tech company to kind of break through. And then basically what they did was they copied the crap out of it, lock, stock and barrel.
Right.
And then try to position themselves so that company would have to buy them. And the first time they did this was with an online auction website in the 90s that was becoming very successful. They saw this thing called eBay and they thought, this could be big. What we do is we'll copy it in Germany. We'll launch a German version of it, and even to the point where they reverse engineered the item code numbering system to make it really easy for eBay just to kind of switch the logo and off they go. And they sold that for hundreds of millions of Deutschmark, and they basically that's just what they do. Anyway, 2009 Groupon was becoming a thing. And had just raised some money, and it was clear that international expansion was what they were going to do next. And so, I met Mark and Oliver Stanwer, and I was number 7 in what was called my City deal. I have to be very careful with the pronunciation there because we often got it wrong, sometimes deliberately. So my City deal was our kind of Groupon copycat, and I was number 7 in that team, and we raised 11.5 million euros, and we launched simultaneously in Berlin, Paris, and London at the start of 2010, and it was a lot of fun. And my role basically was to kind of grow sales and the commercial side. And at the time when I joined, the deals we had were like with nail spas and it was all kind of pretty crap. And I sold a deal with Streetcar. It became Zipcar. I did a deal with that, which was kind of like 50% off membership or something. It was a really the best deal that we had in the portfolio at the time. And then I got sent off to Birmingham to set off the sales office in Birmingham, which was hilarious. Like day 1, arrive in Birmingham, contact the recruitment agency. Day 2, interview as many kids off the street as you can. Day 3, issue contracts and have them start on Thursday. On Thursday, do a cursory amount of training, give them a map of Birmingham. Day 5, get back to London. Next week, go to Manchester, do the same, rinse, repeat. We were growing like absolute crazy. We were sending people out with cash to buy laptops. It was just insanity. Anyway, I was in Birmingham, and I should say in the context I had here, still for me, like business was about the commercial side. It was about building capital, creating capital value. That was my focus, and so I was very attracted to Groupon. Or to my city deal for because it was very clear how we could create value, and it was clear that the Samwer brothers had a very strong track record of, the plan was very clear. You execute, you deliver. At some point, Groupon are going to buy us, and then it's very clear how we're all going to make lots of hay. What I hadn't seen is the other side of this. So what happened was, I was in Birmingham. I got a phone call from the COO, Benedict, and he said, Charles, in his German accent, he said, Charles, have you seen the deal we've got today? And I flicked onto the website, and we had a deal with Costa Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a £10 Costa card for £1. And he said, have you seen this deal? And I looked at it, I was like, bloody hell, like, who else done that? And I knew all the sales things, I'd hired them all, working with them, and they're all, kids off the street. And like, who on earth? And I had done Zipcar, streetcar, and I was pretty proud of that. I was like, who on earth has done a deal with Costa Coffee? And I couldn't believe they'd done this deal. And so I was like, oh, yeah, well done, that's great. Just got off the phone to him, thought about it, got my credit card out, bought one myself.
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes later, I got a call back from Benedict, like, you arsehole, what are you doing? You just cost us £9. And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, you bought the deal. You shouldn't have bought the deal. I'm not going to give you the card. You're not going to get your money back. I'm like, hang on a second. You mean to say we haven't done a deal with Costa Coffee? Like, no, of course. This is just like part of like the business model. We've got to like bring people in. We've got to like, oh my God, like, that is, if you thought about this, we're going to get crap suit out of us, and this isn't the way to do business. And like, what the hell are you doing? Anyway, predictably, about 2:00 that afternoon, we got a phone call from Costa Coffee's lawyers to say, we don't care who you are. We don't know who you are. We don't care who you are. Get that thing off your website now.
Yes.
Because we looked like a scam. I mean, it was 15 people running out of a serviced office in London. It looked and smelled like a scam. We've been in business for 6 weeks. It wasn't a scam. Anyway, we had sold, by the time it did come off the website, I think we had sold 5,000 Costa cards. The next day, Costa Coffee took their card. So what happened next is that they're like, crap, we've got to now service it. We've got to actually send people these Costa cards. So what we did was we contacted Costa Coffee and said, hey, really sorry about yesterday. Can we buy 5,000 Costa cards from you? And Costa Coffee turned around and said, no, that's your problem. So then what we did was we hired a bunch of interns. We sent them out around London with cash to go out and buy as many Costa cards as they could from Costa Coffee shops. Of course, half these interns never came back with the cash that they'd given. The smart ones went off and bought Costa cards, came back and said, here's 20 Costa cards. Can we have some more money, please? Came back again a second time. And then third time said, look, the only bottleneck in this process is the amount of cash you're giving me. How about you give me 10 times the amount of cash? I'll come back with 10 times the amount of Costa cards. Those are the ones we never saw again. They were the smart ones. How to scam the scammers. Anyway, Costa realized what we were up to and basically pulled the Costa card out of circulation. They told every store in London, stop selling this thing.
Wow.
And we had a real problem. We had, 2,003, I forget how many, but it was a lot of unfulfilled orders. That was when we started to hire the customer service department, because the phone was running off the hook because people were complaining. I spent £1 online and I haven't had my Costa card. You're a bunch of scammers. And so we just hired a bunch of people off the street to man the phones, took out another office in the serviced office place. And we had this real problem of like, how are we going to service these Costa cards? And so my suggestion was we simply refunded the money back to the people that bought it, plus the extra £9. So you pay £1, but you get £10 back. And there was some obscure rule with our merchant services firm, and I forget which it was, but I think with if they bought on a debit card, we could refund more than the purchase amount. If they bought on a credit card, we could only refund the purchase amount. So half of the people we were able to refund, and the other half we were still stuck with. With Costa not being able to sell us the card, us not being able to refund the people the money plus the £9 that they wanted, things were getting quite heated. My suggestion was get a prepaid MasterCard, put a My City Deal sticker on the front of it and post it out to people. But my German bosses didn't think that was executable enough, fast enough. And I should say, I've got nothing against Germans. I've lived in Germany and studied in Germany and love Germany. But that these guys were the stereotype. All that is the dark about that that country. And
They put them in innovation. Yeah.
So what happened was they decided that the best way to kind of get this problem away was just to send cash out in the post. And that's when I sort of face palmed and said, like, it's like, no, you can't just send cash to the post. And but that's exactly what we did. So again, we hired a bunch of interns. We sent people to the bank. One of the guys, Frankie, he called me up and he said, Charles, he said, you never guess where I'm at. And I said, well, I don't know, where are you? He goes, I'm at Berlin Tegel Airport, about to fly back to London with a suitcase full of cash. I was like, WTF. And it turned out that there was because we'd only been in business and the bank account had only been open for a certain amount of time, there was a problem with us transferring more than a certain amount of cash from the German bank account to the UK bank account. It was the daily limit was kind of the thing. And because we wanted to send all these 10 quids out through the post, that daily limit, it was just easier to send a guy to Berlin, give him a suitcase full of cash, and then send him back to London again. And then we'd have the cash faster than doing it through. I mean, the mind boggles. So anyway,
I presume that ethics grade isn't run on any of these principles whatsoever.
Let me come to the punchline. So we sent cash to the post. You know, people complained, I haven't received the cash that you sent me through the post yet. To which our response was, how did you know that we were sending you cash to the post? Ding. You know, it's just like everyone was trying to scam the scammers. And
wow, it
was just absolute bloody madness. And anyway, these two brothers, Mark and Oliver, and they're quite famous for this. They flew in sort of seagull management, you know, fly in and shit all over your stuff. And they flew in one morning and just went absolutely erupted. And you know, they saw this bunch of chaos around, and they saw, you know, it's out of control. But what do you expect from a company that has grown from 7 people to 50 people in 6 weeks? And you know, it was absolute bedlam. And they just went on a massive rant, and it was quite terrifying being in that office. Anyway, the next day, we were in the service office in Farringdon, and you guys will know the person who invented the electric elevator, Mr. Otis, quite famous. But the other elevator company is a company called Schindler, which you've probably seen a few times. Yes. And so we used to joke, it was in very, very poor taste, but it was very funny at the time because of these sort of mad Germans who were very aggressive. We used to joke that we always used Schindler's Lift to get out of the building into safety. And we thought it was quite funny. This sort of joke went around the office until one day I walked in at 9 o'clock and someone had put a sign above the door that said "Arbeit macht frei," which was very funny, in very poor taste, but really kind of summed up the feeling that existed there. Unfortunately, that same morning is when Mark and Oliver Samway decided to fly to London. They came in, they saw the sign above the door, they walked in, and you can see the energy was a very negative energy. And I sat there and I was honestly I was looking for the exit. So I was thinking, there's going to be a homicide. I hope it's not me, and I hope I'm nowhere close, and I hope I can get out of here before I witness something bloody, because these guys were like unbelievably aggressive. And I was expecting to see, you know, shows of violence, because we had, like, you know, telephones being thrown across rooms. You know, it was that sort of environment. And instead, what we got was a speech about, you know, who was the person that put this there. Everyone stayed silent. Who was the person that put the sign up above the door? No one said anything. And then we got this speech of, this is exactly the attitude we want in this company. Yeah,
really,
exactly. Unbelievable reaction. Anyway, we had this like 20-minute monologue, and the guys went off to I think Costa Coffee probably to have a coffee and calm down, and I just walked out, and I was gone. I think the next day or the 2 days later, I realised for me that purely building capital, purely creating capital value was not attractive at all to me because of that absolutely toxic environment, total disregard for people and the values and values. That's the thing, absence of values. Anyway, two more things about these guys before we move back onto your question. But I think this is a kind of a very important lesson for me and for hopefully people listening. These guys, they absolutely executed flawlessly on their plan. And we'd raised money in November 2009. I was there for 6-week period from beginning of January to the middle of February 2010. In June 2010, they sold to Groupon. Bear in mind, we raised 11.5 million euros. I think it was unreported what the acquisition price was, but I hear on good authority it was around $120 million. It was paid. So a 10x return in 7 months was phenomenal. And kudos to them for achieving that. But a few years later, other people in my situation actually ended up taking to the internet and published some of what actually was going on in that organization. There was a very famous email called the Blitzkrieg email. I'm sure it's still on Google. If you Google Blitzkrieg Samwer Brothers, you'll see this horrible email about how they came into the office one day and told the team that running a business was basically like running the Blitzkrieg. And obviously, you know, I don't know, maybe in some circles that's an okay thing to say, but coming into London with a very strong South Bavarian accent it just doesn't fly at all. And so for me, you know, there was a very stark realization, and the next company I ran, which was a data science business, you know, for me, building a team, being strong on values was something which I doubled up on because I suddenly had that experience. So, you know, 10 years later, why ethics great? I think it's very clear to me that, you know, my allergic reaction in 2010 to this is something which I think is is much more mainstream now across a wider slice of society, and particularly the generation who are younger than me are coming into the workplace with just a very heightened sense of values and awareness of values and the desire to want to make a better world for their children, to the point that Andy made before we started recording today. And so I think there's just this massive trend of measuring the performance of organizations not based on their financial returns, but based on the impact they have in the world. And I think the second trend is that who gets to decide whether an organization aligns to values and whose values does an organization align to. I think the problem with the ESG industry at the moment is that tends to be white, overprivileged men like myself making those decisions, and I think, you know, it's clear that, you know, people like me are not representative of society. We might be representative of capital ownership, which is a problem in itself, but we definitely don't represent the whole of society. And so if ESG is really all about aligning capital to values, then the ESG industry has to get better at doing that, truly get aligning to capital to values. And I think that's the inevitable trend that we will get to, you know, at the end of this decade. I'm certain the asset management wealth industry will be preoccupied with ensuring that people have their investments working for them in such a way that's aligned to their values. And so for me, when I look backwards at everything I've done, my law degree, you know, looking at, you know, why we have laws and jurisprudence and legal philosophy, through to my time as an entrepreneur and thinking only in terms of kind of creating capital and realizing the dark side of that, and then my time subsequently with the finance industry and, you know, growing expertise on data and analytics and AI. This is sort of the perfect storm of all my experience is now to be on this mission to try to align capital to values.
It's really interesting. I mean, we had a talk with Chris Sear, who and we're talking to him about the value for money push in asset management and that measurement. And he described at the time, the money aspect is something that he's been focused on, making sure that, costs are transparent, etc. And yet the value point you've enlarged to be this is not just performance equals value, but values, isn't it? You're looking at what are the things what do we value? It can be a very subjective point, dependent, white middle class or any other demographic for that matter. And your point is that, well, number one, you need to start to try and establish standards. What's the terminology? What does values mean? So let's establish that, and then put that into both. So therefore you have a methodology, a standard, a framework. But your point is, you're setting up a firm to measure that as well in that that iterative way.
Yeah, I think standards. I mean, I think my view on standards is maybe slightly more nuanced than sort of mainstream view on this. I think it's important that you measure apples against apples, and so when it comes to looking at things like human rights in the supply chain, or plastic pollution, or sustainability, or gender or race diversity, or AI ethics, which is my focus, you compare like against like, and I think where it comes to particularly, you see so many organizations making statements about their aspirations for carbon neutrality, but there's many different ways of measuring this, and there's many different ways of implementing that, and that's where standards are so important, to make sure that we are measuring apples against apples like. But the problem with ESG is also something separate, which I think most people in the financial services industry are not willing to admit, and that's is the kind of the basket of fruit problem, which is in the ESG basket is apples and pears and bananas and pineapple, but the sort of the balance of the fruit basket is determined by people like myself, white, and from overprivileged backgrounds. And the problem is that when you look at all the issues that you might put into your ESG basket, there's gender and race diversity, there's human rights in the supply chain, there's lots of things, but many of those things are things which are very hard to relate to for people from my background, because that's not part of our lived experience. Human rights, being a sweatshop in Bangladesh, or being subject to racial persecution is not something I can relate to. I can intellectually understand it. I can sympathize. I can empathize potentially with somebody, but it's not something I've had a lived experience of. Whereas climate change and the climate emergency, and this planet becoming uninhabitable, and my kids not being able to breathe the air, that's something I can totally understand and totally relate to. So surprise, surprise, ESG is predominantly preoccupied with sustainability and climate change, and I have no data to back that up. That's a wild claim as to why ESG is so dominated by the environment, and I don't think it's because the environment is the biggest issue and the most important issue, and we've intellectually rationalized that is the most important issue. But somewhere, when you're looking at an ESG rating, you are making a judgment call. Gender diversity gets a weighting of 5. Race, do we give that a 4 or 6 or a 5 or a 10 or a 20 or a 0, or you have to make that judgment call if you're rating organizations based on these different things. And I think that's why our approach is saying, we have to get past that, and we have to measure each of those topics according to standards and agree on what those standards should be, but also recognize that there's difference in values, and it's not a question of when a investor, are you an ethical investor, or do you want performance? I think the truth is that all investors, even ethical investors, want their portfolios to perform as well as they can do, but we all have slightly different preferences in terms of what we want to be invested in. And for some people that might be no big oil, other people it might be no big tobacco, and other people might be firms with a good human rights record, etc. And so you've got to be able to fingerprint investors and their investment preferences, and not kind of yes, no, black and white, in or out. It has to be much more nuanced than that. And you have to be able to match that fingerprint back to the investment universe and what's available. And that is a massive gap in the market, and that's what we're trying to solve.
Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating. You're opening up an amazing topic, but I'm going to change gear a little and move to the quiz, and we can tackle some of these other questions if in time permitting later on.
I've got a quick one, though.
I was going to say, I don't envy you measuring, weighing up David Attenborough versus Abraham Lincoln in terms of, virtuosity. It doesn't. It sounds like a very hard scale to manage. But go on, Andy. Go and ask your question.
Before the quiz, hopefully a quick answer. Just change and tack a little bit about you, Charles, you the individual, and how you were processing things in the context that Chris and I are on this mission to build a remarkable offering in the wealth and asset management universe. It might involve ESG. It might involve ethical decision making behind the scenes. It might involve a new way of working. But ultimately, this has to benefit Mrs. Miggins, okay, or some Mr. Miggins. I want to talk to that version of you. It appears between the years of, say, 2000-ish and 2010, you went on this incredible creative journey where you took businesses, plural, from a start, middle, and end. You were given pence and opportunity and transformed things into stories that are tremendously powerful in a commercial learning. They're great, solid case studies. But did the Charles back then, individually, did you have a sense of when all of that would stop for you personally, and you would personally go, right, I'm going to think about my future now? Did you ever for one moment think, when does my current take on the world and solve all its problems journey end? And you think, actually, I don't want to use the word retire, but when did you think you would personally reap the benefits of your hard work? And the reason I'm asking that is because a good and remarkable offering ought to have the wants and needs of a consumer right at its heart. So looking back on that individual version of you back then, did you ever think about the future? And if you did, what did it look like?
Wow. Really hard to give a short answer to this one, but I'll promise you I'll do my best. Given the fact my last answer was like probably about half an hour.
It was an amazing story, and it fueled the whole. Well, he's put all this energy into the world to create all these amazing businesses, but that individual is waiting for his personal ecosystem. So, what was going on there?
So I think so my career has been flip flopping between two modes. One mode has been as an entrepreneur. So ethics grade is number 5. It's venture for me. And as I told you earlier, I spent some time with Standard Bank and over in Canada, and then I ran a data business, and then I joined Deutsche Bank, and then I ran a startup, and then I joined Fidelity. It became clear to me at some point in the last 10 years that actually it's quite healthy for me personally. I'm not saying for all entrepreneurs, but for me personally, it's quite healthy to be to have that contrast, because as an entrepreneur, you worry about source of capital, how you're going to pay the staff at the end of the month, are you going to get the validation from clients, etc. In a corporate role, you have different problems, different anxieties. In my case, mostly frustration of not being able to get things done at a time scale that I would want to do, and having the impact, making the change. So very, very different types of stresses, very different frustrations. And I've always personally found that the corporate role has given me the idea, the juice, and a sufficient dose of frustration to motivate me to get the next thing motoring on. So that's going to be that's how I would sort of characterize my career. And I think, post ethics grade, I think now with a bit more context, I look back at, my data business, BIPB, it was 5 years from start to finish. and then then a year off before I joined Deutsche Bank. I thought that was a good balance of time. And so for me, I look at ethics grade as a 5-year mission.
Right.
It might be 3. It might all be over in a few months. Who knows? It might be the rest of my life. I can't foresee. But I like to look at it as a 5-year mission, like William Shatner heading off to explore the galaxy. And then I would like to find myself back in a financial services organization in a senior innovation capacity, because that feels like home for me. I've spent most of my career now in finance, and I think the thing I really want to do is to be able to help an organization create the conditions to enable other people like me in the corporation to be able to spin out. I'm sure there's lots of people in big organizations who've got great ideas, but for multitude of reasons will never execute on those ideas as an entrepreneur, because life is in the way, or the organization is in the way. And I think a really healthy innovation function is one that can harness that talent, those skills, and those ideas, and help those people fulfill them and potentially spin out of those organizations. And that's something I really like to build when I'm on the other end of my ethics grade journey. And maybe one of those ideas, and hopefully one of those ideas, becomes my next startup number 6. And so that's kind of how I see things. But I see there's only kind of one period in. So I think as an entrepreneur, you're always on a sort of sense of mission. That burning is like religious fervor of sort of you're on a mission to change the world, and that's a wonderful state of flow to be in. And I think really great entrepreneurs, and those who have been the most successful, are the ones that have really internalized what they do, such that it becomes one with themselves. It's a very good mapping to them as a personality and them as an organization. And that's why I feel so happy about ethics grade, because it really does feel that I'm doing something very authentic to me. And so in a respect, it's like a hobby. And there's so many entrepreneurs who in a kind of, you just have to look at Etsy.com and see thousands of entrepreneurs who are just being entrepreneurial around their hobby. And for me, that this, I think I can understand now what that might look like for me. So I don't think I'll ever stop. Is what I'm trying to say. It's a long way of saying I think I'll always be doing
the now. You get energy from the now. The armchair psychologist sees that you're in this. I'm living in the moment, and it is both the past, the present, and the future. And
so I think that's why you see people like Alan Sugar and Branson, in their dotage still work, because it is their hobby. That's what they'd be doing with their time.
Young mindset, or a present mindset, very much in the present.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Are you ready, Andy?
Now I am. When you asked me, I went, and I realised I wasn't, so I took a breath. I am now ready.
I have 5 questions. They are multiple choice.
Yes.
So therefore,
is that buzzer, or how does this work?
You've got a chance of getting at least one. So I will read out the question. I will read out some answers, and I will randomly choose who answers first. We can do this anonymously if you like, but look, we're ethical, we're friendly, we won't cheat. We're not allowed to. We're talking to Mr. Ethics Grade.
Yeah, let's go.
So are you ready? And by the way, they are mildly biased towards your CV, Charles. So Andy is at a natural advantage, and he has to use his guile and cunning in order to claw his way back to the par. So that's the way it will work. So if you're ready, here we go. So question number 1. This relates to your history in the Southwest, Charles. So the Southwest Coastal Footpath stretches from Minehead in Somerset to Poole Harbour in Dorset, and is England's longest waymarked footpath. So how long is it officially? And please don't Google. Is it 630 miles, 600 miles, 570 miles, 540 miles? If you can just I'll go Andy first. What do you think?
570 miles.
570 miles. Okay. Charles.
Is there a point if we get closest to the answer?
No, it is simply yay or nay. It is one of those answers.
I'll go longer. I'll go. Was a 630 option? Wasn't
630. Yeah. You're going to go A. Next question.
Francis Gabon, back in the Middle Ages, worked out the science of the wisdom of crowds, where our average would take out the distance between our worst singular answer. So I did that in my head, thinking that Charles would go 630, and then I went 540 in my head. So therefore, I second guessed it as 570. So I believe that I'm right.
Honestly, there's far more science going on in this. In the
I've got my game. That's what mince pies do.
You have. However, I mean, having
those radio games where they ask the person, how many miles is it from London to New York or something, and then someone says, clearly, stupid answer like
24,000 miles.
Yeah, and then all you have to do to get close to the answer is just put one below that number. And then someone says something even more stupid, like 2,000 miles, and actually then loses. Like, why did you lose?
So here we go. Question
like that right now.
Question 2, since you have an affinity with mileage and the like, but I also know that you've got a greater affinity to Wales, most likely, than you have to England. And I'm not going to ask you anything about Welsh rugby, so that's probably a fortunate thing. But how long is the entire coastline of Wales? And you've got a reference point, obviously, of Southwest Coastal Footpath. So A, is it 1,380 miles, 1,480 miles, 1,580 miles, or 1,680 miles? It includes Anglesey if you're doing some certain calculations in your head. Charles, you can go first this time. So we've got 1,380, 1,480, 1,580, or 1,680.
I'm surprised at any of those because I live on the Offa's Dyke, which is the footpath that goes basically north to south on the English border, and that's only 100 and something miles. So if I think about how far Wales goes out and then up around, and 1,000 miles really, it's the lowest one of those, 1,400. I can't believe it's any more than that. That's
okay. 1,380. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, Andy.
Well, what I've done, I've drawn a quick sketch of the UK. And then I've written 570 around the sort of southwest coastal part.
Okay.
Then I made a scale in my head.
Yes.
To go around the coast of Wales. Okay.
I do apologise. He's never been this analytical before.
1,580.
That's your answer.
Yes.
So C. So Charles has gone AA, and Andy, you've gone C. Oddly, your initials, you've gone the reverse. Anyway. Moving on.
See, now he's being too analytical.
On page, and this is a particular one for Charles, I'm afraid. On page 921 of the Brexit trade deal, there are several references to decades-old computer software as well as security algorithms. You know this, Charles. Which one is specifically mentioned? Is it the MD5 hash algorithm? Is it the SHA1 hashing algorithm? Is it the Kekak hash algorithm, or is it the corned beef hash?
That's good. I hope it's the corned beef hash. That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? If I was drafting that trade agreement, having spent 11 months or however long it was negotiating, I'd have just slipped that one in. on Christmas Eve, was anyone going to notice it? We'll just change it to corned beef hash. Thank you very much. And then it all comes out after both the European Parliament and Westminster ratify it. And then what are we going to do?
So Andy, I'm afraid I'm going to go for you because...
well, this is going to have to be a guess because I only got up to page 850 when I read it.
Okay, fair enough. The MD5, the SHA1, the Kekak or corned beef?
No, the A.
You sure? A, okay.
Well, not sure, but...
Charles?
A.
Yeah, it's definitely A or B. I'll go for B. I have no idea.
B it is. Right, here we go. Fourth question. The South Korean Go champion, this is a topic that you know as well, Charles, Lee Sedol was beaten by an AI-powered machine from Google's DeepMind called AlphaGo in 2016. They played 5 games. What was the score? Was it 3-2? And by the way, obviously the computer won. Was it 3-2? Was it 4-1, 5-0, or 2.5, 2.5? But Lee lost because he had more comfort breaks than his opponent. Are you seeing through my dud answers? Is it that obvious? So, Charles, it's you to go first. Is it a 3-2 close, 4-1, 5-0, or a draw? 2.5, 2.5.
I'm pretty sure it's 5-0. I think the interesting thing about the story was that when IBM made Deep Blue to play Garry Kasparov, that was very close. I can't remember the score, but I think he only just lost and then appealed it and really couldn't accept they'd lost it. And then I think he called the governor of Georgia and said, "You've got to fight." I don't know, it was some different story, but
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's when he ventures into politics. Exactly.
Yeah, so 5-0, 5-0.
5-0. So that's you're going for C. What do you think then, Andy?
Is it Go? That's that mad game with all the dice things.
Well, it's a bigger board, and just got black and white counters. Yeah.
I read a book a few days ago that a guy taught himself the basics in 20 hours. I wish I'd paid attention. I'm sure this story was in it. Was it a fixed round? They had to play 5 games.
Well,
otherwise, if it was, 3-0,
it was 5 games. Yeah.
I've lost the point now. So maybe it went 1-1, 1-1, and it went down to the wire. So therefore 3-2.
Is that what you're going for?
Mm.
Okie dokie.
That'd be more interesting to watch, at least.
The last question. Since we're talking about ethics, I thought I'd quiz you on the word itself. And so the question is...
Sorry.
It's me.
That's the...
That's my wife telling me I'm late.
You've got it. So, here we go.
Easy quiz, yeah.
What does isoplethic mean? It's not fair, is it? Is it related to a cultural phenomenon spanning decades? Is it related to topographically similar shapes? Is it related to a line on a map registering the same amount? Or is it related to your first cousin and you really shouldn't have married?
How long did it take you to come up with that one? That's good.
Unfortunately, not very long at all. Go on, Andy.
Well, isometric is a type of drawing.
Exactly.
Dimensions. So ice and planet is tab B.
You think similar shapes?
Yeah, similar shapes. I'm going B.
Charles, is it about cultural phenomenon, similar shapes, line on a map, or your first cousin?
Cultural.
Cultural?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your answers. I will now reveal.
In times of yore, when we sat in pubs, that would have been a good round.
That would have been... Would you have played your Joker?
No, but now I'd be off getting the midi cheddars in the second round in whilst we hear the answer.
Here we go. The Southwest Coastal Footpath is 630 miles long. The answer is A. Charles is correct.
Yes.
The coastline of Wales is 1,680, which is the longest. So it was D.
Wow.
So unfortunately, neither of you. The security algorithm was the SHA-1 hashing algorithm. Charles, you get another score.
Oh,
I know. You can come back, Andy. It's possible.
Because you asked me if I was sure on that and I said no.
And here we go. South Korean Go champion. Neither of you correct. It was 4-1.
Oh.
I believe you won the first game and then it was just a bulldoze.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
And then the last question, isoplethic actually means related to a line on a map about the same amount or ratio, which is C.
Sure.
Well, however,
it's got good ethics. Chris. That was the.
Sorry?
I thought the answer was in the question. What was it going to do with ethics then?
It's got the word ethic in it. That was it. I
Oh
said
my goodness!
ethic.
That's why I went for the cultural bit. Oh my word!
I should see you bought the red herring.
That was a low scoring but terrific quiz.
Well, unfortunately, you lost